choose to love where freedom flies. From my heart where the light keeps shining. And I choose to feel the whole world crying for the strength that we can rise above. I choose love.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever and whenever you're listening to this. My name is Andreas with Grace Healing. I have with me today, Larry. How are you doing, Larry?
Great. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, today we want to talk about omnipresence, the omnipresence of God and what that may mean. And like I always do, I like to look at what it means in the dictionary. And omnipresence, so that we're all on the same stage here, on the same page. Omnipresence or ubiquity is the property of being present everywhere. The term omnipresence is most often used in religious contexts as an attribute to a deity or supreme being, while the term ubiquity is generally used to describe something existing or being everywhere at the same time. So we as humans have a hard time with that, I think, because we use our mind, right? We always need to deduce everything and analyze everything with our mind. And even when you look back, I was reading St. Thomas said once, every idea conceived by the mind is an order which the organism obeys. It can also, he added, engender a disease or cure it. And I think it's not the mind that does that, right? It's what's behind the mind. The mind may be just a tool. So yep. Are we in a battle of mind amongst humans? Why can't we accept or live with that omnipresence that's here?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, even our physical form, like you're there, I'm here, and we forget the fact, the nature, even quantum science is talking about the fact that all things are interconnected. There's times where a mother has a sense that her son has just been in a car accident. There's a time where a daughter senses that her mom just passed. There is a divine connection in the nature that God is present and omnipresent in all places. Therefore, if we are tapped into the awareness of God, we are connected in all places. If we are not connected to God, we are connected anyway, but there's moments where we tap upon something and go, oh my God, where's Jim? You know, and we're reaching out for somebody in our lives because there's this moment of connected awareness that we are not seeking God, and then all of a sudden, just in the world, we have this weird sense or shift within ourselves that something has changed. That connection is there, whether we want to recognize it or not, and there are times where it happens so powerfully by our physical connection to somebody or our spiritual union with somebody that it surpasses our concept of being divided. This human body here, your human body there, whatever, and the people in the audience. And when we were talking about this concept, what happens is people allowing for this concept of separateness or separation or individuality without the recognition of the perfect union in God takes people out of a place of trust. And the whole idea to recognize the omnipresence and omnipotence of God is to recognize that God has already been there. No matter what you're witnessing in your walk upon the earth, God knows the measurable result based upon your freedom of choice, the freedom of choice of those that surround you. That's what I see in our God is so vast and unexplainable beyond the limits of the mind that God is absolute perfection. God is the clarity of all things in a blessed resolve, a blessed resolution. And God is already the blessed result before you go through the stuff that happens before the blessed result emerges. And there are many people that just reach out to prayer through Grace Healing, and they don't understand why this thing is happening, or, you know, I feel like I was totally useless when I did that thing in my past, or when I was doing this job, and I feel like I was really of no value. And it's like, well, no, you got to understand that you had a contract with God before you even came into this human condition. you knew these things. So as you're walking this out and you see the experience of losing a close loved one, or encountering a situation that was highly stressful, or encountering a situation where separation of a job, God knew this. God's omnipotence, God's omnipresence is already present in the resolve. If you can release the emotional attachments and the spiritual influences by that experience, like we've talked about this before, when people pass away, friends that are close to us, loved ones, family members, or whatever, if you can honestly reach into the presence of God and release the spirit of grief, release the spirit of sorrow, release the spirit of sadness, and go through that experience with God, it's totally different. Like when I lost my son unexpectedly. He was in his 20s. It was just totally unexpected, completely out of the blue. Saw him the day before, boom, he's gone. Releasing the spirit of grief allowed me for cleansing tears through purification in God's presence, not suffering into grief through anger, frustration, denial, all these experiences of the grieving process. Each time these experiences rose up, I was able to relinquish the emotional attachments and the spiritual influences within those emotional attachments, touch upon God's presence, and move through it, knowing that God is already the blessed result. So if I trust in the omnipresence, I trust in the omnipotence, that's what I hook onto, not the emotions that are stirring within me. I use the emotions as defining points. That once I've passed the gap moment of choosing God first, the emotions are merely the defining points of what spiritual influence is emerging within me. Grief, sadness, sorrow, anger, denial. These are the captives that I set free into God's loving embrace.
Let me take us back for a moment into some real life situations, where we may have experienced our mind being or trying to be in charge. And, one example I think I shared with you before is in the early 2000s, I had 7 months of unemployment. And it got to the 6th or 7th month when I just didn't know what to do anymore, because we always want to know the why. Why is this happening to me? What is the result? Why is nothing happening to improve my situation? So what I did then is I made an experience where I went to church every day and prayed a novena, which is my understanding is it's a prayer that you just repeat several times over and over. And I think it was to St. Francis or St. Anthony, specifically to pray for abundance or a job, a career. And 3 days later, all of a sudden I received a call out of the blue from somebody I haven't heard of for years, making a suggestion I should talk to this and this person in Savannah, and that there may be an opportunity for me to get a job. And that's what happened. And I've been in awe because I've been struggling, for 6 months.
Yes.
And by just surrendering myself to God, it happened. Exactly. It's fascinating.
And again, we had spoken of this before. The key to remember is that peaceful recognition, that calming state that few days before, that 3 days before or whatever, when you started drawing into a state of prayer, was available for you on day one. But you were allowing the evidence of the earth to make you move to a place of distress, anxiety, fear of provision, all these things for 6 or 7 months. And what I try to help people understand is the omnipresence of God, the omnipotence of God, already knew that 7 months and 3 days, you were going to come upon the opportunity of blessing, and it was going to manifest. God didn't have any question. God wasn't in doubt. God did not embrace any spiritual doubt. God is the blessed result. So if on day one we begin this awareness with enthusiasm, oh, cool, I'm moving on to a new opportunity. But then 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks down the road, we're, man, I'm not getting any feedback. I'm not getting any results. What is wrong with me? Instead of, God, I know you are with me. I seek you and you alone. And God reveals to you spiritual attachments that you had from the previous employment situation, previous anger or frustrations you held towards their actions against you. You're releasing these things over this 5, 6, 7 week, 7-month period to be prepared for greater blessing. That's available for you day one, not 7 months and 3 days. So if a person utilizes this time, not through emotional drive, not through spiritual influence, but honestly recognizing that whether God's result is happening in 33 days or 7 months and 3 days, God's result is going to happen. Every feeling, emotion, or situation I am touching between this moment and the culminative result is opportunity for me to give freedom to any captives that rise within me. Is it anxiety? Anxiety for provision, fear of provision, fear of loss. Am I fear of losing my possessions of my home? Am I fearful of not being able to make my payments on a car? Each one of those I've just named was a gift and opportunity to let go of that spiritual hold within you so that you move and flow with greater ease. And this can be likened into a sales situation, especially if somebody's moving into sales. Because if you go put a sign across your forehead, I'm financially independent, I don't need your business, and you walk out as a salesman, you have a greater success than you do that person running around scrambling, trying to make sure appointments are in perfect order because they really need to make money this week. That person will never make a sale because they are governed in fear, they are unstable in their responses, they are not clear in their offerings, and they would not be presenting people with what they need. They would present to people what the salesman needs, a sell.
It sounds really simple. It's like second nature to you, isn't it, Larry? As it always, oh, I was on mute.
No, good.
Oh, you heard me. Okay. Well,
yeah.
It's like second nature to you. It sounds very simple, but it really isn't, is it?
Well, in the midst of it, I mean, I fall into it too. But there's a moment when I remember, wait a minute, here I am. I'm getting sucked down the rabbit hole of fear. I'm getting sucked down the rabbit hole of frustration or whatever. And I connect with those people that I love and trust most within my life, whether it's you or Ina Marie or Robin or the people that I hold closest in trust within my life when I need to relinquish something. But I've also had now, I mean, close to 30 years of practice of developing a reflexive response, God first. So if I'm all of a sudden a little, frustration comes in, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not God first. So I've developed this reflexive awareness that the description you gave of the gap moment of choosing God first, to me, it's a reflex. And then I know immediately, whoa, that's not of God, because it's God first. And then whoa, and then I know what is not of God. Now, sometimes I can be a rat and fall into, well, I'm just pissed and I'm going to be angry about this, and as I get to the point where I'm starting to run out of gas on my anger, I'm like, God, just thank you for your forgiveness. I know that it precedes my failings. I receive your forgiveness and I release to you the spirit of anger.
I know you like chocolate. Is chocolate of God?
I believe it is. I mean, all things in measure, a measure of blessing.
Right.
I mean, not excess. Now, if I was eating my chocolate all day, every day, that would bring me to a state of imbalance. That would bring me to a spirit of gluttony. So I love my dark chocolate with the almonds or the dark chocolate with the coconut from the keto bark things, and just excellent. But it's not something I have to have. If I miss a day, it's not like I'm running around like going, oh my God, I need a fix, Where's my chocolate? But I do know when I was younger, I used to smoke cigarettes. And I was in that place where I needed a cigarette. Not even for the cigarette. Half the times you wouldn't even smoke it. You might light the thing and then you're walking around, it's in your hand, you're doing stuff, and then you set it down and you completely forget it. But it was the action of doing that became the habitual response. And then over the course of 30 days, I just chose that every single time I smoked a cigarette, I took it out and I blessed it. And I said, I'm so grateful to be a non-smoker. And then I smoked it. Now, obviously, people around me at the restaurant or the bar where I was waiting to pick my wife up or whatever, they'd look, what are you talking? You're a non-smoker? Yeah. And I keep smoking the cigarette. They were like, what? But there was a bartender that watched me through this whole process. And at the 30th day, I just opened the pack of cigarettes, and I swear to you, it felt like somebody was reaching around my body and opening a pack of cigarettes. I didn't even recognize my arms. It was so powerful in my brain that I went like this, and I'm like, whoa. And I'm like looking at the cigarettes, and I'm holding a cigarette in my hand after I pulled the tin foil out and everything, and I'm like, and I crushed the cigarette, I threw the pack up on the bar, and the bartender looked at me and started laughing. His name was Hall, H-O-L. And he got what was going on for the previous 30 days was I chose God, and I chose to reprogram and set the reflexive response within me to be, I was a non-smoker. And it never even occurred to me to have a cigarette for months. Like, I think it was about 3 months. But this whole process. God has graced me to be able to develop the habitual response that it is God first. So if I see any muddled stuff happening in the earth, stuff that's going on, anything's happening on a political level, anything's happening on a personal level, I know that God is the blessed result. So why am I going to get embroiled in the emotional state or the spiritual influence when I can embrace God and look for God and look for God, and then God reveals something that's not of God, and I release it, and I release it, and I release it, and I continue forward to your 7 month and 3 day result in a state of blessing for the 7 months and 3 days. Not angered, not frustrated, not worrisome, not all these things. I choose God within it. So then when I enter upon that 7 month and 3 day job opportunity, I am more clear, I am more centered, I am less fearful about how am I going to integrate into this new working environment, because I know I've been cleared of all the relationships I had in my past job situations, and I only bring forward the wisdom I gained from it, not the negatives that I experienced in it, because I've been purified through this 7 month and 3 day process.
It's really interesting. I just had a revelation here of my own. Somehow coming into this discussion, I thought we need to deny our mind, or we need to put it in the back row. But now, just listening to this, no, that's not the case. Because the mind, as you just described it, the patterns that we can establish through autosuggestion or positive, expressions, things that we say that can influence the outcome, right?
Yeah.
But the outcome, nevertheless, is already decided through the omnipresence of God.
It's very clearly known. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's where, I find this extremely interesting. How much do you release yourself from your own mind so that you can grasp the omnipresence of God, or how much do you use your mind as an instrument to understand it?
In my understanding, it would be the other way around. I would submit all things before God in the gap moment, God, even my mind, including the thoughts within that mind. I would submit them unto God, total surrender into God. And then my mind would become an instrument for God's use, not my little journey of expression. If it's my journey of expression, I'm going to want to justify my thoughts using my mind. I'm going to use my mind as an instrument to justify the thoughts that I formed while veiled through limited thought. But if I submit before God my mind, meaning God's creation in my mind, I give God my mind, and then I weigh God's presence against my thoughts, I would recognize that of the 20, 30 thoughts that I was just holding, God really only values 5 or 6 of them in this moment. Or God wishes me to act upon one, and I have enough trust in God's omnipresence or omnipotence to go, I need to set aside those other 29 and just function on this one. Because God blesses me in the awareness that this thought placed within my mind was the one that God wished me to gain, and then I added on 29 on top of it. But if I submit myself first unto God, give over my mind, like you and I in our prayer right before we came onto this, the prayer of protection for people that would listen, and our willingness by God's grace to submit ourselves fully for God's use, to submit our tongue, our mind, and all aspects of our beings to be used by God for his will, not what we want to teach. And it's kind of been cool because this has been different. We had, for the sake of the audience, we had some major technical difficulties the first time we did this interview process, and everything just kind of went all wiggy. Now we've come back in on it, and Andreas came back to some of the points that were just in that original video. It's the same answer, but there's been different answers to bring us to the same result. I think it's pretty amazing. That's the omnipresence of God. I'm not distressed that the first video got messed up. I'm in awe of how God has turned it to an even more powerful tool to help people realize their participatory role with God to either overtake and ignore God and use your own mind, or submit your mind before God so that God can use it to govern your thoughts.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah, and there's a key word that came out here, and it's that we tend to use our minds for justification.
Yep.
In justification, judgment, measurement of earthly things, but we can gift our mind, submit our mind to God, and find out in the process that there's much more there than our mind can possibly conceive.
Agreed.
So it's fascinating. Well, I think we're coming slowly to the end of this broadcast. Do you want to add something else, Larry, before we wrap it up?
Actually, I'd like to make a personal plea to people in Thanksgiving that each of them will join me in prayer over this next week, because I am being led by God to draw away from the demands of ministry and the demands of my work and just go sit and be present with God in an actual place of meditation, drawing away from the demands of the earth, all the things that are going on. And there's been so many prayer needs that I'm just feeling like God is guiding me to a place to seek his presence. So as people do go to our gracehealing.org website or gracehealing.video to look at the videos or the new podcast program, please join a prayer with me that God would reveal God's will, not mine, within the nature of all things that are forming for Grace Healing and the many things that God is going to express. I would be grateful for that. So. And
that's perfect. And I might add, please participate. Please don't be shy by putting comments on our YouTube videos that are constructive, that are prayerful, so that we can be in touch and have a conversation going on, because that will just enrich everybody's experience, I think. So you can do that on our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the gracehealing.org website. There's a pop-up where you can put your email address in. So,
as they say in all the YouTube channels, like and subscribe. That's what helps move the message forward for people in greater numbers. So please do that.
Please, that would be great. All right, with that, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Larry. And I'll be with you in prayers during your little trip in silence, or whatever is going to happen. I can't wait to hear.
Some people call them retreats. I call them advance. Instead of a retreat, I'm going on in advance. I'm seeking to advance in the nature of God's will, and so it's instead of retreating back, it's a forward advancing. So I'm just surrendering into that time for the next 5 or 6 days, or whatever God leads me to do. So
we can't wait to hear what may come out of it. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, everyone, and we'll be talking soon again.
Blessings to you all.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.